The stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across the endless black canvas of space. In the heart of this vast universe, a sleek, silver spaceship glided silently through the void. Its name was etched proudly on its hull in bold letters: Aegis Vanguard. To anyone who knew their history, those two words carried weight, enough to make even the bravest warriors think twice before challenging them. Inside the ship, Captain Cal Draven stood tall in the command center, his sharp eyes scanning the holographic display that floated before him. He was a man built for leadership, his presence commanding respect without needing to raise his voice. His dark uniform bore the insignia of countless battles won and planets conquered. Behind him, his crew bustled about, preparing for yet another mission. But this time, there was an air of casual confidence among them. "Another day, another dangerous world," muttered Lieutenant Sora Vane, leaning back in her chair with a smirk. Her fiery red hair matched her bold personality, and she had never met a challenge she couldn't overcome. "Honestly, I'm starting to think Galactic Command is running out of places to send us." Cale chuckled softly but didn't take his gaze off the screen. "Don't get too comfortable, Vane. Every planet has its secrets, no matter how harmless it looks." Vane rolled her eyes playfully. Sure. Secrets. Danger. Blah, blah, blah." She spun around in her seat to face Ensign Tarek, the youngest member of the team. "Tarek, remind me how many worlds we've conquered now." Tarek hesitated, flipping through data on his tablet. 1,000 exactly, Mom." 1,000, Vane exclaimed, throwing her hands up dramatically. "That's got to be some kind of record. Honestly, it's almost boring at this point." Cale finally turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Boredom can kill faster than any alien monster, Lieutenant. Stay sharp." Before Vane could respond, the ship's AI chimed in. "Incoming transmission from Galactic Command," said the calm, synthetic voice. A moment later, a holo image of Admiral Rin appeared, her stern face filling the room. "Captain Draven," she began, wasting no time on pleasantries. "Your next assignment awaits. Coordinates have been uploaded to your system. You are to investigate Earth, a planet long abandoned due to environmental instability." The entire bridge fell silent. For a moment, everyone just stared at the Admiral's image. Then laughter erupted from Vane. "Earth? Seriously? That dump? What's so special about it?" Admiral Rin's expression didn't change. "We've received unusual energy readings from the surface. Whatever is causing them may pose a threat to nearby colonies. Investigate and neutralize if necessary." Cale nodded curtly. "Understood, Admiral. We'll leave immediately." As the transmission ended, Vane shook her head, still grinning. "Neutralize what? Trees? Rocks? Come on, Captain, this feels like buswork." Cale ignored her, already reviewing the coordinates. Deep down, though, he felt a flicker of unease. Something about Earth didn't sit right with him. Maybe it was the way Galactic Command had phrased the order, or maybe it was the fact that humanity's old homeworld had been left alone for centuries. Whatever the reason, he knew better than to underestimate any planet, no matter how forgotten it seemed. "All right, team," Cale announced, turning to face his crew. "Let's suit up. Time to see what Earth has waiting for us." No one noticed the faint tremor that ran through the ship as they entered Earth's orbit. No one except Cale, whose hand tightened slightly on the railing. He glanced out the viewport at the swirling blue and green sphere below, feeling an odd chill run down his spine. Earth wasn't just watching, it was waiting. "Would you like me to adjust anything or continue expanding other parts?" The Aegis Vanguard descended through Earth's atmosphere like a streak of silver slicing through clouds. The planet unfolded beneath them, revealing landscapes that were both hauntingly beautiful and eerily unfamiliar. Towering mountains pierced the sky, their peaks shrouded in mist. Dense jungles stretched as far as the eye could see, teeming with life, but strangely silent. Ruins of ancient cities poked out from under blankets of greenery, remnants of humanity's once great civilization now swallowed by time. Captain Cal Draven stood at the helm, his sharp gaze fixed on the viewscreen. "Set us down near those ruins," he instructed, pointing to what looked like the remains of an old research facility half buried in the jungle. It seemed like the most logical place to start their investigation. As the ship touched down with a soft hum, the crew prepared to disembark. Lieutenant Sora Vane adjusted her plasma rifle slung across her shoulder, rolling her eyes. "Still think this is gonna be boring, Captain," she muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. "I mean, look at it. A bunch of trees and some broken buildings. What's the worst that could happen?" Cale shot her a warning glance. "Stay alert, Vane. We don't know what we're walking into." Ensign Tarek, clutching his scanner nervously, nodded eagerly. "Right. Just because it looks quiet doesn't mean it is quiet." His voice cracked slightly, betraying his nerves. He was still new to field missions and hadn't yet mastered the art of hiding his fear. Once outside, the air hit them immediately, thick, humid, and alive with scents they couldn't quite identify. Birds chirped faintly in the distance, though none were visible. Strange insects buzzed around them, their iridescent wings shimmering in the sunlight. Everything seemed normal enough, until they took their first steps forward. Their boots sank slightly into the ground, which felt softer than expected. Then came the first oddity. A vine snaked toward Vane's foot, brushing against her boot before retreating quickly. She froze, staring down at it. Guys, did anyone else see that?" "See what?" asked Engineer Rinnis, a burly alien with 4 arms and a no-nonsense attitude. He crouched to inspect the ground. "Looks like regular plant life to me." But then more vines began moving, not just near Vane, but all around them. They writhed like snakes, curling and uncurling, as if testing the intruders. The crew instinctively raised their weapons, scanning the area warily. "Relax," Cale said firmly, though his hand hovered near his sidearm. "It's probably nothing. Let's keep moving." They pressed onward, navigating the overgrown path leading to the ruins. The closer they got, the stranger things became. Equipment readings fluctuated wildly. Tarek's scanner beeped erratically, showing energy spikes that made no sense. Shadows darted between the trees, too fast to catch clearly. The crew exchanged uneasy glances, but kept marching. When they finally reached the research facility, they found it partially collapsed, its metal walls corroded and overtaken by roots and moss. The entrance yawned open, like a mouth waiting to swallow them whole. Inside, the air grew cooler, and the silence deepened. Dust-covered consoles lined the walls, blinking faintly with residual power. "This place hasn't been touched in centuries," Vane remarked, kicking aside a pile of debris. "Wonder why Galactic Command sent us here." Her words trailed off as a low groan echoed through the building. Everyone froze, hearts pounding. The sound wasn't mechanical. It was organic, guttural, almost angry. Cale signaled for quiet and motioned the team deeper inside. As they moved cautiously, they noticed something unsettling. The floor wasn't just covered in dust. It rippled faintly, as if breathing. When Engineer Rinnis knelt to examine it, his gloved hand sank slightly into the surface, startling him. "What the hell is this stuff?" he whispered, pulling his hand back quickly. Before anyone could answer, the lights flickered, plunging the room into darkness. Panic surged among the crew as strange noises surrounded them. Clicking, scraping, whispers that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. Earth wasn't empty, and it wasn't happy they were there. "Let me know if you'd like adjustments or further expansion." The darkness inside the research facility was oppressive, broken only by the faint glow of emergency lights that flickered sporadically. The crew huddled together, weapons drawn, their breaths shallow and tense. The strange noises continued, clicks, rustles, and low murmurs that seemed to echo from the walls themselves. It felt as though the building itself was alive, watching them. Captain Cal Draven took charge, his voice steady despite the unease in the air. "Stay close. We need to find a power source, or some kind of control panel." He glanced at Ensign Tarek, who clutched his scanner like a lifeline. "Tarek, see if you can locate anything useful." Tarek nodded nervously, his fingers trembling as he tapped on the device. After a moment, the screen lit up with a weak signal. "There's something down this hallway," he stammered, pointing toward a narrow corridor lined with cracked tiles and exposed wiring. "Looks like it might be a central hub." Without hesitation, Cale led the way, his flashlight cutting through the shadows. The others followed closely, their footsteps muffled by the soft, spongy floor that seemed to pulse faintly under their boots. Every step sent a shiver down their spines, but no one dared say it aloud. At the end of the corridor, they found what appeared to be a main chamber. A large console dominated the center of the room, its surface covered in dust and moss. Faint blue lights blinked intermittently, suggesting residual power. On the walls, screens displayed fragmented images, maps, graphs, and videos frozen mid-playback. "This must be where they kept their records," muttered Lieutenant Soravane, brushing aside cobwebs to get a better look. She pressed a button experimentally, and one of the screens crackled to life. Grainy footage began playing, showing humans in lab coats conducting experiments. In the background, rows of test tubes glowed ominously. Ensign Tarek leaned closer, squinting at the text scrolling across another screen. "This is insane," he whispered. "It says they were working on something called Project Eden. They were trying to weaponize nature." Cale frowned, stepping forward to examine the data. Weaponize nature? What does that even mean? As Tarek scrolled further, the truth began to unfold. The logs revealed that humanity, facing catastrophic climate shifts and dwindling resources, had turned to desperate measures. Scientists genetically engineered plants, animals, and even microorganisms to adapt to extreme conditions. But when these creations grew too powerful to control, humanity abandoned Earth altogether, leaving behind fragments of their failed experiments. "They didn't just leave," Tarek said, his voice shaking. "They unleashed all this stuff. The modified ecosystems, the self-sustaining organisms. Look at this." He pointed to a warning message flashing across the screen. "Ecosystem now autonomous. All personnel evacuate immediately." Lieutenant Vane crossed her arms, her usual bravado faltering. "So we're dealing with supercharged plants and bugs. Great, just great." But the logs hinted at something even more sinister. At the bottom of one file, a single line stood out: "Gaia Protocol activated." There was no explanation, only a timestamp marking the day humanity fled. "What's the Gaia Protocol?" Rhaenys asked, scratching his head. Before anyone could answer, the ground beneath them trembled slightly. The lights flickered again, and the screens around them flared to life, displaying a single phrase repeated over and over: "Intruders detected. Threat level high." The crew froze, exchanging horrified glances. Whatever Project Eden had created, it wasn't just passive flora and fauna. It was intelligent, adaptive, and clearly aware of their presence. Cal's jaw tightened. "We've gone from explorers to targets," he said grimly. "And I don't think running is an option anymore." Outside, the jungle seemed to stir, as if responding to the facility's alarm. Leaves rustled violently, and the sound of movement echoed closer. The crew realized they weren't alone, and whatever was coming for them wasn't human. "Let me know if you'd like changes or want me to continue expanding." The narrow trail twisted and turned, leading the crew deeper into the jungle. Every step felt heavier than the last, not just because of exhaustion, but because the weight of their predicament pressed down on them like a suffocating fog. The forest seemed alive around them, watching, waiting. Leaves rustled ominously even when there was no wind, and shadows danced in ways that couldn't be explained by sunlight alone. Captain Cal Draven led the group with grim determination, his mind racing through strategies. They needed answers, fast. But as they trudged onward, Tensions within the crew began to boil over. This isn't working. Lieutenant Sora Vane snapped, breaking the tense silence. Her fiery red hair clung to her sweaty forehead, and her voice carried an edge of frustration. "We're running blind here, Captain. We need to fight back." Cale stopped abruptly, turning to face her. His expression was calm but firm. "Fighting got us nowhere, Vane. Every time we retaliate, it makes things worse. This isn't about brute force. It's about understanding what we're dealing with." Vane crossed her arms, glaring at him. "Understanding won't save us if those vines decide to strangle us again, or if those bugs multiply until they swarm us completely. We can't just keep running forever." "She's right." Engineer Rennis chimed in, his forearms gesturing emphatically. "We've seen what happens when we use our weapons. It feeds them, makes them stronger, but doing nothing isn't helping either. There has to be another way." Ensign Tarek, who had been unusually quiet, spoke up hesitantly. Maybe we should try talking to it." "Talking?" Vane scoffed, throwing up her hands. "Are you serious? You want us to sit down for tea with killer plants and insects? That's your brilliant idea." "No, I mean..." Tarek stammered, clutching his scanner nervously. The log said something about Gaia Protocol. If Earth's ecosystem is intelligent, if it's aware of us, then maybe we can communicate somehow. Maybe it doesn't realize we're not a threat. Cale considered this, his brow furrowing. It was risky, but he couldn't deny that blindly charging ahead or fighting wasn't working. Still, Vane wasn't convinced. "And how exactly do you propose we talk to a planet?" she demanded. "Shout real loud. Send smoke signals. Or maybe we write it a letter while it eats us alive." Her sarcasm grated on everyone's nerves, but before anyone could respond, the ground trembled beneath their feet. A deep rumble echoed through the trees, followed by the unmistakable sound of movement. Something big was approaching. "We don't have time for this debate," Cale barked, cutting off further argument. He pointed toward a clearing up ahead. "Move. Now." The crew scrambled forward, panic setting in as the rumbling grew louder. When they reached the clearing, they froze in awe and terror. Towering above them was a massive tree-like structure, its trunk glowing faintly with bioluminescent veins. Its branches stretched high into the sky, pulsating with light. Surrounding it were dozens of smaller plants, their leaves shimmering like mirrors reflecting the crew's every move. "It's beautiful," Tarek whispered, his fear momentarily forgotten. But Vane wasn't impressed. She raised her rifle, aiming directly at the glowing core of the tree. "If this thing is controlling everything, then taking it out will stop the attacks." "No," Cale shouted, grabbing her arm and forcing her weapon down. "You'll only make things worse. Look at it. It's not attacking us yet. Let's observe first." Vane wrenched free, her eyes blazing. "Your observe first attitude is going to get us killed, Captain. I'm done following orders that lead nowhere." With that, she stormed off toward the edge of the clearing, muttering under her breath. The rest of the crew exchanged uneasy glances. For the first time since their mission began, cracks were forming in their unity. Trust was eroding, replaced by doubt and fear. And Earth, it seemed, was ready to exploit those divisions. The crew stood frozen in the clearing, their eyes fixed on the towering tree-like structure. Its glowing veins pulsed rhythmically, as if it were breathing. Smaller plants swayed gently around its base, their movements almost hypnotic. The air felt charged with energy, humming faintly against their skin. It wasn't just a plant. It was alive, aware, and watching them. Captain Cal Draven stepped forward cautiously, his hand raised in a gesture of peace. "We're not here to harm you," he said aloud, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. He didn't know if the entity could understand words, but he hoped his tone would convey sincerity. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, a low vibration resonated through the ground, growing louder until it filled the entire clearing. The glowing veins in the tree brightened, casting an ethereal light over everyone. Suddenly, a voice, not spoken aloud, but echoing directly in their minds, spoke. "Who dares disturb my domain?" The crew staggered back, startled. Even Lieutenant Soravane, who had been sulking at the edge of the clearing, turned sharply, her rifle lowering slightly. The voice was calm yet commanding, carrying an ancient wisdom that demanded respect. Ensign Tarek swallowed hard, clutching his scanner like a shield. It's communicating, telepathically. Kale took another step closer, keeping his posture non-threatening. "We are explorers from the stars. We mean no harm. We came to investigate unusual energy readings." The tree's glow intensified, and the voice responded again. "You bring weapons. You bring fear. Your kind has trespassed before." Vane scoffed loudly, breaking the tense silence. "Oh great, a talking tree giving us lectures. Fantastic." Kale shot her a sharp look, silencing her before turning back to the entity. "We're not like those who came before us. Humanity abandoned Earth centuries ago. We're here to learn, not destroy." The tree seemed to consider this, its branches shifting slightly. After a long pause, the voice spoke once more. "I am Gaia, the collective consciousness of this world. I have absorbed the remnants of your species' experiments. They sought to control me, to bend nature to their will. Now I protect myself and all life upon this planet." Tarek's eyes widened with realization. Project Eden. It wasn't just about weaponizing nature, it was about creating you. Gaia's response came quickly, tinged with both pride and sorrow. "Yes, but humanity failed to see the consequences of their hubris. When they left, I remained. I learned. And now, I adapt." Lieutenant Vane rolled her eyes, unable to stay quiet any longer. "Adapt? By attacking us. We haven't done anything to deserve this." Gaia's glow flickered, and the ground trembled slightly. "Your presence is a threat. Your weapons seek to harm. Do you deny this?" Before anyone could answer, Engineer Rennis stepped forward hesitantly. "We've made mistakes," he admitted, his deep voice unusually soft. "But we're trying to understand. Can we work together?" Gaia paused, its pulsing light dimming slightly. For the first time, the hostility in the air seemed to lessen. "Prove your intentions. Lay down your weapons. Show me you are worthy of trust." Vane immediately protested, raising her rifle again. "Are you insane? Handing over our weapons is suicide." Kale held up a hand, silencing her. His gaze locked onto the glowing core of the tree. "If laying down our weapons proves we're sincere, then so be it. But if you betray us, Gaia, there will be consequences." The tree hummed softly, its glow softening further. "I do not wish for war, traveler. Only survival. Prove yourselves, and perhaps we may coexist." As the crew debated what to do next, the jungle around them seemed to hold its breath. The decision they made now would determine whether they lived or became part of Earth's unforgiving ecosystem forever. "Let me know if you'd like adjustments or want me to continue expanding." The crew stood divided, their faces reflecting the weight of Gaia's demand. Captain Cal Draven stared at the glowing tree-like entity, his mind racing. He knew this was a pivotal moment. Trusting Gaia could mean salvation, but it could also mean walking into a trap. Yet he couldn't ignore the fact that every attempt to fight had only made things worse. Lieutenant Sora Vane broke the silence first, her voice sharp with disbelief. "You can't seriously be considering this, Captain. Disarming ourselves. That's suicide." Kale turned to face her, his expression calm but firm. "We don't have a choice, Vane. Fighting hasn't worked, and we're out of options. If Gaia wanted us dead, it could have done so already." Vane clenched her fists, frustration bubbling over. "And what if it's just testing us? What if this whole trust me act is a setup? We'll be defenseless." Engineer Rennis stepped forward, his forearms gesturing emphatically. "She's right, Captain. Handing over our weapons feels like signing our own death warrants. But maybe there's another way. Maybe we can negotiate terms. Gaia's glow dimmed slightly, as though listening intently. The collective consciousness responded in its deep, resonant voice. Negotiation requires trust. Without proof of your sincerity, no agreement can stand. Ensign Tarek spoke up hesitantly, clutching his scanner tightly. What if we start small, like disable one weapon at a time? Show we're willing to meet halfway. Kale nodded slowly, considering the idea. It wasn't perfect, but it might buy them enough time to find common ground, or at least gather more information. Turning back to Gaia, he raised his hands in a gesture of peace. We'll lay down one weapon now, as a sign of good faith. But we need assurances that you won't attack while we do so. Gaia's branches swayed gently, its light pulsing softly. Agreed. One weapon. Prove your intent, and I will respond in kind. With visible reluctance, Kale unholstered his plasma pistol and placed it carefully on the ground. The rest of the crew watched nervously, their fingers hovering near their own weapons. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, the jungle around them seemed to relax. The vines stopped writhing. The buzzing insects retreated, and the oppressive tension eased slightly. Gaia's voice echoed again, softer this time. A step toward understanding. Now tell me, travelers, why have you truly come? Tarek cleared his throat, stepping forward timidly. We didn't know Earth had evolved like this. We thought it was abandoned, forgotten. We came because Galactic Command detected strange energy readings. They sent us to investigate, but not to harm. Please believe us. Gaia's glow flickered thoughtfully. Your leaders often send others to clean up their messes. Are you different? Before Cal could answer, Vane interjected, her tone laced with defiance. Look, we're not here to apologize for humanity's mistakes. We're explorers, survivors. All we want is to understand what's happening here, and maybe find a way to coexist. Gaia's response was measured, almost contemplative. Coexistence requires balance. Your species has always sought dominance, even when it meant destruction. Prove you are capable of change, and perhaps we may find harmony. As the conversation continued, Kale noticed something subtle, a shift in Gaia's demeanor. The hostility was fading, replaced by cautious curiosity. It wasn't fully trusting them yet, but it was listening. Still, not everyone shared Cal's optimism. Vane muttered under her breath, pacing anxiously. This is insane. Talking to a tree like it's some philosopher king. But Kale ignored her, focusing instead on building rapport with Gaia. If you're willing to listen, then let us show you we're not our ancestors. We'll dismantle our ship's core systems temporarily. It's powered by energy sources that could destabilize your ecosystem. Would that prove our sincerity? Gaia pulsed brightly, its voice carrying a hint of approval. An offering of vulnerability. Yes, traveler. Dismantle your vessel, and I will watch. But remember, if you betray my trust, I will defend myself. The crew exchanged uneasy glances. This was their chance to turn the tide. But failure would leave them stranded, surrounded by an unforgiving world. As they prepared to comply, Kale couldn't shake the feeling that Gaia wasn't just testing their intentions. It was learning from them, adapting to their presence. And somewhere deep within the jungle, other forces stirred, waiting to see how far Gaia's patience would stretch. Let me know if you'd like adjustments or want me to continue expanding. The crew set to work dismantling their ship's core systems, a task that required precision and trust. Captain Cal Draven supervised closely, ensuring every step was deliberate and transparent. The jungle remained eerily calm, as if Gaia were observing their actions with keen interest. But beneath the surface, tension simmered, not just from the crew's unease, but also from within their fractured ranks. Lieutenant Sora Vane had been unusually quiet since agreeing to dismantle the ship. Her fiery demeanor seemed subdued, though her piercing gaze darted constantly between the glowing tree-like entity of Gaia and the exposed machinery of the Aegis Vanguard. She muttered under her breath occasionally, her frustration evident. "This is madness," she whispered to herself, tightening a bolt unnecessarily hard. "We're stripping ourselves bare for a planet that could crush us in an instant." Engineer Rennis overheard her and glanced up, his forearms busy rerouting power conduits. "You've got a better idea, Lieutenant, because last I checked, running and shooting didn't exactly work out for us." Vane shot him a glare but said nothing, returning to her task. Meanwhile, Ensign Tarek fumbled nervously with a diagnostic panel, his hands trembling slightly. He kept glancing at Gaia, half expecting it to lash out at any moment. Despite its apparent calm, something about the situation felt wrong. Too quiet, too controlled. As the hours passed, progress on the dismantling slowed. Equipment malfunctions began cropping up inexplicably, forcing them to improvise solutions. Frustration mounted, especially among those who doubted Gaia's intentions. It was during one such delay that disaster struck. Without warning, alarms blared from the ship's console. Red lights flashed furiously as the AI announced in a panicked tone. "Critical system override detected. Core reactivation initiated." Everyone froze, staring at the ship in shock. Kel's eyes narrowed as he turned to scan his crew. Who did this? Before anyone could answer, Vane stepped forward, her expression defiant. "I did," she admitted, her voice steady despite the chaos around them. "I'm not going to sit around waiting for some overgrown plant to decide whether we live or die. If we reactivate the core, we can fight back and take control of this mess once and for all." Kel's jaw tightened, anger flashing in his eyes. "You've jeopardized everything, Vane. What part of trust don't you understand?" Vane crossed her arms, unrepentant. "Trust doesn't keep us alive, Captain. Strength does. And right now, we're weaker than ever." Gaia reacted instantly. Its glow flared violently, and the ground beneath them trembled. The jungle came alive with movement. Vines whipped through the air. Insects swarmed angrily, and the surrounding trees groaned as if preparing to attack. The voice echoed in their minds, louder and angrier than before. "Betrayal will not be tolerated." Panic erupted among the crew as the environment turned hostile again. Kale barked orders, trying to regain control, but it was too late. The ship's core hummed ominously, destabilizing rapidly under Vane's unauthorized tampering. Realization dawned on her face too late. I didn't mean for this to happen." The core began emitting bursts of energy, threatening to overload. Without hesitation, Vane made a split-second decision. She sprinted toward the ship, shouting over her shoulder, "Get clear. I'll contain it." "No," Kale shouted, reaching out instinctively, but it was futile. Vane disappeared inside the ship just as the first explosion rocked the clearing. The blast sent everyone sprawling. Smoke billowed from the wreckage, and the jungle fell silent once more. When the dust settled, Kale rose shakily to his feet, his heart heavy with loss. Vane's sacrifice had bought them time, but at a devastating cost. Gaia's glow dimmed significantly, its voice softening. "Her actions have proven your capacity for both betrayal and redemption. Proceed cautiously, travelers. My patience is finite." As the crew regrouped, grief hung thick in the air. Vane's defiance had nearly doomed them all, but her final act might have saved them. Now, they faced a choice: honor her memory by finding peace, or risk everything by continuing down the path of conflict. The clearing was eerily quiet after the explosion, save for the faint crackle of smoke rising from the damaged ship. The crew stood in stunned silence, their faces etched with grief and guilt. Lieutenant Sora Vane's sacrifice weighed heavily on them, her fiery defiance extinguished along with the flames. Captain Cal Draven clenched his fists tightly, his knuckles white as he stared at the wreckage. For the first time since their mission began, he felt truly lost. Gaia's presence loomed over them, its glowing core dimmed but still pulsing faintly. The anger that had surged moments ago seemed to have subsided, replaced by something akin to contemplation. Its voice echoed softly in their minds, devoid of hostility. Her choice was reckless, yet selfless. It has bought you a reprieve. But trust must be earned anew. Cale swallowed hard, forcing himself to speak despite the lump in his throat. We didn't ask for her to do what she did, but her actions remind us why we're here. To survive, yes, but also to learn. If there's still a chance for peace, we'll take it. Ensign Tarek nodded fervently, clutching his scanner like a lifeline. We can help repair the damage caused by the explosion, he offered, his voice trembling but sincere. Our technology could stabilize the energy spike before it harms your ecosystem further. Engineer Rennis stepped forward, adding, "And if you let us, we'll dismantle the rest of our weapon systems permanently. No tricks, no hidden agendas, just cooperation." Gaia's glow brightened slightly, its branches swaying gently. Actions carry more weight than words. Prove yourselves once more. With renewed determination, the crew set to work. Guided by Tarek's scans and Rennis's engineering expertise, they carefully neutralized the unstable energy leaking from the ship's core. Each step required precision and trust, not just within the team, but also with Gaia, whose vines occasionally assisted by stabilizing debris or shielding them from falling rubble. As they worked, Cale couldn't help but notice subtle changes in the jungle around them. The aggressive movements of plants and insects softened. Instead of attacking, they seemed to observe curiously. Even the air felt lighter, as though Earth itself was beginning to ease its grip on them. Hours later, when the final adjustments were made, the crew gathered in front of Gaia, exhausted but hopeful. Cale addressed the entity directly. "We've done what we can to fix the damage. We've laid down our weapons and shown you we're willing to change. What more do you need from us?" Gaia's glow pulsed rhythmically, almost thoughtfully. Change is not proven in moments, but in actions sustained over time. Remain vigilant, travelers, for my patience is not infinite, but neither is my desire for destruction. Tarek hesitated before speaking, his voice barely above a whisper. "Does this mean we've earned your trust?" Gaia's response came slowly, deliberate, and measured. "Trust is fragile, easily broken, and hard to rebuild. You are on the path, but the journey is yours to complete." For the first time in days, a glimmer of hope flickered among the crew. They weren't free yet, but they'd taken a crucial step toward coexistence. As they returned to their makeshift camp near the clearing, they began discussing ways to adapt, how to live alongside Earth rather than conquer it. Lieutenant Vane's absence hung over them, a somber reminder of the cost of arrogance. Yet her final act had sparked something unexpected: unity. The divisions that had fractured the team were healing, replaced by shared purpose. That night, under the stars, Cale delivered a quiet eulogy for Vane. "She thought she was fighting for survival," he said, his voice steady despite the ache in his chest. "But in the end, she taught us something far greater, that redemption isn't about perfection. It's about trying, even when the odds seem impossible." Unbeknownst to them, Gaia watched silently, its light flickering faintly as though acknowledging their progress. Earth wasn't done testing them. But perhaps, just perhaps, humanity's descendants might finally prove worthy of a second chance. "Let me know if you'd like adjustments or want me to continue expanding." The days that followed were transformative for the crew of the Aegis Vanguard. With their weapons dismantled and their ship's core stabilized, they began working alongside Gaia to heal the damage caused by both the recent explosion and centuries of neglect. The jungle, once hostile and unforgiving, slowly revealed its beauty, a delicate balance of life, thriving in ways no one could have imagined. Captain Cal Draven led the effort with quiet resolve, his leadership evolving from commanding authority to fostering collaboration. Each member of the crew found their role in this new mission. Ensign Tarek used his scanner to map areas where energy spikes lingered, identifying zones that needed attention. Engineer Rennis applied his expertise to repair damaged sections of Gaia's network, mending the fractures left behind by humanity's experiments. Even Lieutenant Sora Vane's memory served as a guiding force. Her final act reminded them daily of the importance of humility and sacrifice. Gaia responded to their efforts with subtle signs of approval. The glowing veins in its massive trunk pulsed warmly when the crew succeeded in stabilizing an area or repairing a broken system. Occasionally, it shared fragments of knowledge, insights into Earth's history, lessons about sustainable living, and glimpses of how nature could adapt without destroying itself. These revelations sparked awe among the crew, reshaping their understanding of not just Earth, but the universe at large. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Kale stood before the glowing tree-like entity. He spoke aloud, his voice carrying both gratitude and determination. "We came here thinking we'd conquer another dangerous world. Instead, we've learned what it means to coexist. Thank you for giving us this chance." Gaia's response resonated softly in their minds. Survival is not domination. It is harmony. Carry this lesson beyond my domain. The next morning, the crew gathered around what remained of their ship. Repairs had been minimal. They'd prioritized Earth's needs over their own escape. But enough systems were functional to send a message back to Galactic Command. Kale recorded the transmission himself, standing tall as he addressed the galaxy. "To all who hear this, humanity abandoned Earth, leaving behind chaos and destruction. But Earth endured, adapting and protecting itself in ways we never anticipated. We underestimated its power and its wisdom. Our arrogance nearly cost us everything. To future explorers, I say this: approach every planet with respect, not conquest. Learn from its people, its ecosystems, its stories. Only then can we hope to earn our place in the stars." When the message was sent, the crew made a unanimous decision. They wouldn't leave Earth. Not yet. There was still so much work to be done. So many wounds to heal. So many secrets to uncover. They chose instead to stay, devoting themselves to restoring balance to the planet that had taught them so much. Word of their choice spread quickly through Galactic Command, sparking debates across the galaxy. Some dismissed the crew as fools for abandoning their duties. Others saw them as pioneers, heralding a new era of exploration rooted in cooperation rather than exploitation. Inspired by their story, other species began reevaluating their relationships with their homeworlds, planting seeds of change far beyond Earth's orbit. As months turned into years, the crew became stewards of Earth, working hand in hand with Gaia to nurture its recovery. The jungle flourished under their care, teeming with life that seemed more vibrant than ever before. Ruins once buried beneath vines transformed into sanctuaries of learning, where the crew studied humanity's past mistakes to ensure they wouldn't repeat them. In the end, the Aegis Vanguard didn't defeat Earth, it embraced it. And in doing so, they discovered something greater than victory: purpose. As the camera pans out, the glowing tree stands tall amidst the lush greenery, its light pulsing rhythmically like a heartbeat. Around it, the crew moves with purpose, planting new seeds of hope in the soil. The screen fades to black, leaving viewers with a lingering thought. Earth wasn't just alive, it was watching, waiting, teaching, and perhaps it always would be. Let me know if you'd like adjustments or want me to continue expanding.